Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from May 29th to June 4th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you don't want to miss out on this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. Then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top US MSOs that you keep seeing pop up, especially tier ones that you think will be worth more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready, if you wish to do so, pending whatever incremental reform or legislation that we are waiting on that I continue to report. But with that, from KARC.com, Arkansas tops $100 million in all-time medical cannabis tax revenue. So great job, Arkansas, not only for providing a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to those medicinal users in your state that need something different from, addictive opioids, but of course you see the benefits of ending reform. Now you have $100 million in resources that can hopefully go back to the people of your state. And so they spent about $23.9 million, those in Arkansas, on medical cannabis in April, purchasing over 5,000 pounds, bringing in $2.85 million in tax revenue, enough to put the state over the $100 million total tax revenue figure since launching their medical program in 2019. And it's worth noting that in the first 4 months of 2023, patients spent $94.4 million on cannabis, versus in the first 4 months of 2022, they spent $89.8. So good to see that growing slowly but surely, as quickly as they can recruit new patients that are being supplied through the state's 38 dispensaries. No doubt if they flip for adult use, you need a lot more than 38 dispensaries to properly supply the demand, but we'll cross that bridge for Arkansas when we get there. But with that, from Missouri Independent, happy to share similar success stories. Where does the revenue from Missouri cannabis sales and licensing fees go? And worth noting that Missouri recently launched their adult use program at the end of last year, and it's been very successful, but they've had medical since about 2019 as well, similar to Arkansas. And also similar to Arkansas, since Missouri's cannabis sales began in 2019, the state has collected nearly $100 million in revenue from taxes and program fees, according to state authorities. No doubt they're happy about this. So of course you can pause to read all the benefits. I'm not going to spend too much time going through this, but just wanted to show it to you because it's all summarized very nicely. Medical program, where these proceeds go. A bit of a breakdown in a little chart here. And then adult use revenues and costs, you can pause to read. Different breakdown on this little chart here. And then from however DHHS down, this last bit of that article. So this is what's going on in Missouri. Hopefully, of course, when you have this accumulated resources, they can go to the right places for the citizens and be reinvested properly. Well, we got this one out of Baltimore as we are preparing for Maryland to officially launch next month, July 1st. Dispensaries prepare for more sales when rec cannabis becomes legal. So happy to announce that this is coming, as they're expecting a massive increase in customers on the first day of July. Other states have shown an uptick of anywhere from 10 to 20% of the population that consumes cannabis. So we're talking about 400,000 to a million people, and our current customer base is 150,000. Wishful thinking, of course, but you got to prepare for anything. Other companies likely won't have the license before the end of the year, and it may not be ready to sell until this time next year. So any existing operator for medical that was able to sell for rec is going to capitalize on this opportunity the most. And then there's just a bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read, as dispensaries are preparing for more sales, and all we can do is wait until July 1st, and I will update you, but I'm sure there's going to be long lines. Trellis anticipates that every dispensary will have hundreds of people on day one of legalization in Maryland. We await that day, and we look forward to it. And so with that, from Benzinga, an interesting headline that we would think would make more waves, but obviously doesn't, only on my channel possibly. But this cannabis-based drug has outperformed Pfizer's Lyrica in clinical trials, a new dawn for diabetic nerve pain management. You'd like to think, but this wouldn't be the first time that cannabis-based drug or cannabis outperforms some sort of prescription medication or opioid, but it doesn't end up being a new dawn, right? We've seen this before, but worth highlighting. Zylira Therapeutics, a leading player in cannabinoid medicine research, has successfully demonstrated that its proprietary drug for diabetic nerve pain surpasses the efficacy of Pfizer Inc.'s market-leading drug Lyrica, and obviously seems to be based on cannabinoid medicine, so should be a big win for the plant. Shares of Zylira traded up more than 220% on the Australian Securities Exchange on Wednesday. Man, who's following that? But there's more here if you wanted to pause to read on what this could mean. Again, I think it just highlights that cannabis has always been outperforming a lot of opioids on certain, studies, if you actually were to look for the real data. All that to say, I figured I'd share a few studies that came across my path this week to back up that claim. This first one from Drug Science, Medicinal Cannabis for Pain, Real-World Data on 3-Month Changes in Symptoms and Quality of Life, published as of May 25th, 2023. So of course you can pause to read for the background and method, and while I will note it's a very small study, just 55 participants. Of course, it's hard to get large sample sizes for cannabis, but for what it's worth, the data doesn't lie. 3-month data indicate that medical cannabis use was associated with significant reductions in self-reported pain, intensity, and and pain interference. Additionally, there were significant improvements in quality of life, general health, mood, depression, and sleep, with one adverse reaction was reported, which was mild in nature. Maybe they had a little panic attack, and since cannabis doesn't kill you, an hour later, they're like, okay, good, thank God, I'm fine. And so conclusions, of course, the data doesn't lie, but increasing uptake of medical cannabis coupled with growing evidence of both the effectiveness and safety of these medications indicate a need, of course, both to make medical cannabis more widely available by ending cannabis prohibition and to reduce financial costs associated with its use. At least they're not saying we need to do more studies to find out what we already know, but essentially that's sort of where we're at. So we continue pushing through from the International Journal of MS Care. Now, this is an older study, but did come across the page. So multiple sclerosis and the use of medical cannabis, a retrospective review of a neurology outpatient population. It seems like this was published in a recent volume from IJMSC, but pointing out background and methods you can pause to read. And again, another small sample study, just 141 patients, but patients experienced extensive MS symptom improvement after initiation of medical cannabis with alleviation of pain and spasticity and improvements of sleep, the most common. There was a significant reduction in concomitant opioid use after initiating medical cannabis, as evidenced by a significant decrease in daily morphine milligram equivalents among patients prescribed opioid analgesics. However, decreases in muscle relaxant use and benzodiazepine use did not reach significance. So very interesting, and I just found this to point it out because opioids are primarily used for treating pain, so cannabis clearly replacing that, whereas benzos for anxiety disorders, seizures, acute insomnia, and alcohol withdrawal. So interestingly enough, and so in conclusion, of course, I just invite you to read this because the main point highlights the findings, and the last bit, I don't want to read it because it's just going to piss me off, and I'm sure you know what it is. We need to do more studies to figure this out. But with that, a few more studies that I came across. They're older, but still interesting, and if you haven't come across them, they'll be in the description if you want to check them out. Thank you, Mark Landers, for sharing this one. Cumulatively, these studies indicate that THC has anti-tumorigenic and anti-metastatic effects against lung cancer. Sounds very beneficial for medicinal practices and ought to be adopted, and hence descheduling cannabis from the CSA where it never belonged in the first place. While we got this one from Amir England, again, will be in the description if you want to check it out. Effects of cannabis legalization on adolescent cannabis use, looking at Oregon, New York, and Washington, and Canada, Uruguay, I believe, other states. So the biggest sample size we have to date between 1999 and 2020 finds no significant difference between states that legalized versus ones that didn't. So if you don't know, now you know. Link in the description if you want to go through that. But on to some state news from MJ Biz Daily. Cannabis MSO set to enter New York adult use market after policy change. Interesting. I don't think they're going to race in, though, at the fees that they're still expected to pay. Unbelievable. But new legislation and major policy shifts have been proposed to stabilize the absolutely terrible rollout of New York's adult use cannabis program, including allowing some of the nation's largest multi-state operators to enter the expanded program by year's end. And so regulators at the Office of Cannabis Management, OCM, recently proposed the revised regulations to jumpstart the potential $3 billion market with more retail locations, as they only have 12 legal ones open as of right now, with 1,500 illegal ones. But whole thing, the OCM's plan for multi-state operators to enter the market has generated plenty of buzz and controversy in New York, where cannabis MSOs, including Curaleaf Holdings, Green Thumb, and PharmaCann, want to make a bigger splash, and they've started a lawsuit. I hope they continue to go through with it, but those companies currently serve only the state's medical cannabis market, and they're being shafted. But the proposals, which OCM is expected to approve following a public comment period, effectively eliminate a 3-year waiting period for the state's 10 vertically integrated medical cannabis providers or registered organizations to enter into the recreational market. And why would they have done this? Well, thanks to hindsight, we know the incompetent communist regulators of New York adopted the waiting period to provide a first-to-market advantage for social equity retailers and smaller suppliers. But of course, we've learned the hard way, social equity is not equal access to opportunity. It means equal outcomes for everyone in the legal market, therefore delaying and making everyone equally poor, while regulators collect their paychecks and the black market thrives with a slap on the wrist. And sadly, you just see, there's a lot of opportunity, but equity right now doesn't feel achievable, said Annette Fernandez. Of course it doesn't, Annette, because you've been played a fool. It's really sad, but it is what it is. Under the state waiver plan, MSOs will be assessed multi-million-dollar one-time fees to transition into the adult use market. Hence why they put the lawsuit against the OCM, and I hope they continue with that lawsuit. No reason they should pull back. And so you can pause to read a bit more here. But this is some of the main changes to the bill. And of course, similar to the OCM proposal, Senate bill would allow MSOs to convert 3 of their medical stores to rec retail while charging them at least $20 million in one-time fees. Imagine a liquor license in New York for a year is like a couple $1,000s. You want them to pay $20 million to provide a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to the illicit cannabis that you let run rampant? absolute horseshit. You cannot make this up. It's straight extortion. So again, I hope the MSOs don't comply with this and they keep the lawsuit going, but I'm not sure what they're going to do. All that to say, you can pause to read for a little bit more here. Otherwise, you can grab the link in the description to read the full thing. Pause to read a little bit more, but just want to bring you down to this bottom industry reaction. Yeah, a lot of people are being impacted financially. He said every link in the supply chain is on the verge of bankruptcy. And that's what happens when you put communism over American ideals, sadly. And so hopefully New York can fix themselves. But with that, New Jersey's largest weed company used political connections for a fast fix. Yeah, and don't try to act like if you weren't able to do that, you would do the same thing, especially when you face so much discrimination from the regulators in New York, New Jersey, on the East Coast, focusing on what you know is bullshit, social equity. And so after New Jersey's largest weed supplier, Curaleaf, was banned by state regulators from selling rec cannabis in April, the company enlisted a former New Jersey Attorney General to fight the order, according to this author from NewJersey.com. Now, Chris Perino, a state Attorney General under Gov. Chris Christie administration, immediately appealed the decision in the company's bid to keep its ability to sell rec cannabis. Very interesting, but of course, if you're a company that's invested a lot of money into the state in order to try and supply the demand for a safer, non-addictive alternative, but then the state gives you such a hard time. And what do you know, one business day after the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission took a vote that would have taken away Curaleaf's license to sell rec cannabis at 2 of its 3 dispensaries as of April 21st, or effectively 2 of its 3 revenue streams for adult use in New Jersey, it abruptly scheduled a special meeting to reverse that decision. And since Boris Jordan has invested so much money, I'm sure he would not take that lightly. And this is all, I believe, in spite, from my understanding, that the Regulatory Commission was pissed that they shut down a cultivation facility that was no longer profitable because the regulators did not allow them to open enough legal outlets to sell wholesale through, which is, again, effectively a problem of the regulator. And so when you consider that and the fact that Curaleaf in the testimony did say that they did not lay off all these workers, they found them jobs elsewhere, either in New Jersey or in other states elsewhere if they were able to travel. So again, New Jersey regulators just seem to be pissed off and doing more of the shenanigans that we've seen out in New York. And so it's a very long article. If you want to grab the full link in the description and go through, of course, you can pause to read some snippets. I don't want to spend too much time going through it. Again, I don't know, but from watching the testimony and all that, I hear one side, I hear the other side, and it does just seem that it's more just social equity or non-American shenanigans trying to get in the way of allowing industries to thrive where they ought to. And so with that, Chris Norman, another update out of New Jersey is New Jersey Cannabis Commission just voted to renew annual licenses for Verano, TerraSend, Ascend Holdings, and Air Wellness. Where is Curaleaf in here? And so hopefully we'll have some updates on this, but I just found this and figured I'd share it. Senator Booker's guy, Commissioner Barker, voted no to renewal on all except Air. Why would you vote no? This is like, replace these incompetent idiots. Other licenses were no votes too. Unless applicant is social equity, Booker vote is a no. It's horrible. It's terrible. So sadly, it seems Booker wants a New York model. Let's hope that New Jersey never succumbs to that. But just a bit more here on that comment if you wanted to pause. And with that, out of Florida, some great news. Cannasource.io, Florida adult personal use of marijuana ballot initiative reaches 967,528 valid signatures, well beyond the 891,523 needed. And so while I believe I've shared this in the past, it seems that this is now at least up to date and confirmed. So happy to share that. With that, out of the Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, we can see new dispensaries approved from May 29th to June 2nd. And we see Green Dragon opened in North Miami, another Move One backed by Verano in Miami, and Sanctuary Cannabis in Boynton Beach. And if we look up, qualified patient count did increase to 822,818, which represents a week-over-week increase of 1,995. So good to see that number continuing to head up. While dispensations from May 26th to June 1st, so this is just for this past week, all the MSOs in the state, the number of active dispensaries they have, and then the number of milligrams of THC sold for this past week, the number of milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and ounces of smokable flower sold alone just this past week. And so a great resource to keep tabs on, especially for the medical side of Florida. But with that, a great resource again from connoisseurs.io. We appreciate you joining the community and the great visuals that you provide. And so of course, breakdown of market share leaders here. We've got flower, THC, and CBD, but of course we've got the nice visuals that he provides that are better on the eyes. Total flower sales, ounces by company, total THC sales by company, total CBD sales by company, of course, pause to read, and then total dispensing locations by company. And so with that, said press release for Verano opening its first medical cannabis dispensary in Miami-Dade County. So good to get exposure into that busy, dense downtown area with their 68th Florida location. So, and of course, you can pause to read. If you are interested in learning more about Verano, you can grab the link in the description, but pause to read this bit, and then, of course, I'll bring it down a little bit further so you can pause to read the rest here. And then with that, from Florida, Trulieve continues optimization efforts with closure of California retail location and plan to wind down Massachusetts operations. We knew California was hard, did not know Massachusetts would be that difficult, but of course, a state on the East Coast focusing on social equity. That's why we can't have nice things. And so, of course, steps taken as part of ongoing efforts to bolster business resilience. So, got a lot lot in this press release here if you want to pause to read. If you are a shareholder in Trulieve, I certainly recommend that you do read through this. Of course, you can grab the link, but even better resource from CEO Kim Rivers and Toby Cannabis. They had their Twitter Spaces on Thursday, and so this is the recording of it, about an hour and 4 minutes. A lot of information. I don't recall a direct answer, though, about the Massachusetts question, which I would have liked, but there is a lot of good information from Kim, and, again, does remind you to zoom out and look at Trulieve from the big picture. A lot of promising things coming, and figured I'd share this because Canisters.io makes it so easy for us. June is about to be a wild ride for Trulieve, hopefully if things go as planned, but never do things in this industry usually do. June 12th, Alabama's first medical cannabis licenses will be awarded, and Florida Supreme Court initial arguments for ballot initiatives are due on this day, so we'll at least hear a bit of an update out of Alabama, how quickly they might get a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to opioids for their patients. And then June 14th, Georgia Board of Pharmacy will consider proposal for pharmacies to sell cannabis products. And so that's June 12th, June 14th, and of course a big month as we wait for the rest of the news at the end of June, whether an announcement from the rescheduling or descheduling from the Human Health and Services or from the DOJ and the Attorney General, whether that's a Garland Memo 2.0, or of course, whether we see SAFE actually get put on the floor for a vote, as that's supposed to come before the end of the month as well. And so June unspecified. Also, Florida Supreme Court might actually weigh in and make a final decision. I believe June 12th was the date on that. And so lots of news coming this month. I will be relaying it all. But I did find this that sort of contradicts what we saw in the last bit, so just figured I'd share it. You can now buy cannabis-based nasal spray in Georgia. And so maybe you can buy nasal spray, but not other cannabis products. But according to this Yahoo News article, so take it with a grain of salt because it is Yahoo News, but a medical cannabis distribution company with Georgia locations, Trulieve, announced that a cannabis-based nasal spray would be available in their store starting Wednesday. The nasal spray called Momenta will be available at the Marietta and Masson dispensaries, and according to Trulieve, the nasal spray is intended for patients suffering from seizures and has fast-acting effects when anticipating the onset of seizures. So possibly for those with epilepsy. A bit more here if you wanted to pause to read, but for what it's worth, I think that's all the article really has. A little bit more down here. But yeah, so whether Georgia is online yet or whether it's going to come online, then we will find out. But good for Trulieve to have that footprint. And with that, marijuana moment, California Assembly approves bill to legalize cannabis cafes. Massive step, as more states that have legalized should do this to normalize cannabis as drinking is normalized. To be clear, this does not allow coffee shops to sell cannabis. It allows cannabis shops to sell coffee with pre-approval from local governments. And so early on in this process, but we'll share this as updates come. More in the description if you wanted to read the full story. While California Senate passes bill to stop employers from asking about past cannabis use. Another great way to stop discriminating, and normalizing. When you think of normalizing and discriminating at the same time and you mix them up, the measures would build on existing employment protections for cannabis consumers that were enacted last session. Love to see California leading the way with this. Of course, if you're using cannabis in your spare time, much like alcohol, there is no reason for you to face discrimination from your employer. And so more on these stories if you wanted to read the link on the description. With that, from normal.com, Colorado legislation becomes law permitting online sales of retail cannabis products. I think this is big. Do you think this will help drive sales back up in Colorado? As of course it's one of the more mature markets, and we've seen sales fall, especially because there's a lot of illicit cannabis. I'm sure that makes its way there. I'm not sure. Let me know what you think in the comments if this will help increase sales. But the law allows licensed retailers for the first time to accept payment online for the sale of retail cannabis and retail cannabis products. How can they do this though if they don't allow credit cards? Interesting question. Proponents say that the bill's intent is to limit the number of in-person cash transactions taking place at licensed retailers. It's a good point because that will reduce dispensary robberies and will reduce overall death and improve public safety. And so obviously full things here if you wanted to pause to read. But thank you, Normal, for continuing to call on Congress to do their job, and we are waiting from now until the end of the month for them to hold that vote like they said they would. While Marijuana Moment shares, Colorado governor signs bills bolstering cannabis-related protections for working professionals. So same thing we're seeing out of California. Thank God for these mature markets like California and Colorado that have gone a long way in normalizing and ending the discrimination already. Of course, many other states have no idea that, if you were to go to this state, this is the attitude towards cannabis. It's great, but new law effectively codifies an executive order that the governor issued last year. And so full link in the description if you wanted to read through this. But again, great success stories from states that have ended prohibition a long time ago. Therefore, they are way ahead of implementing, common sense policies around cannabis versus other states that are still, in the dark and haven't done anything. Well, last one for Marijuana Moment is Rhode Island launches online medical cannabis patient registration system. It is very important that patients create an account in this portal to be sure they get important messages and updates. And just this follow-up message almost makes you less likely to want to use it because, of course, we hope this is designed to help the patients get the education and the quick access they need to their cannabis, but also any online database that collects data on cannabis users sadly can be used against them as well. And so let's just hope that the best intentions are at mind here. Full link in the description if you want to go through that. But with that, wanted to share this one from David Milstead, globeandmail.com, as canopy growth shrinks its way out of even the S&P TSX Composite Index, which is very embarrassing. But just to note that anything can happen in an instant in the markets, essentially. As at its peak in early 2021, when all cannabis stocks ran, Canopy's market value topped $25 billion. But it's interesting to note that it's not the first time that it got close to there, because in 2018, when Constellation Brands invested $4 billion into Canopy in the summer of 2018, before the legislation got signed off and the bubble popped, Canopy's market cap hit about 23 or 24 billion. So not the first time that it's gotten back up there. Hence, though, that's when you want to sell, of course, if you bought in early. But worth noting that as of Friday, the share price closed at $1.14, making the company worth about $600 million. And so think about this, though. In the early days of Canopy, at some point, they had to be worth $600 million before they got up to $25 billion a couple times. But quickly enough, or how quickly it can happen, they can go from $25 billion all the way back to $600 million. So just a reminder, anything can happen in the markets, especially if big whales that have money want it to happen. So plan accordingly for your own situation. But with that, last few stories, Cannabis Business Times 2023 State of the Cannabis Industry Sound Off, a compilation of quotes and commentary chronicling this moment in the cannabis market. If you're interested, features Kim Rivers and George Archos, but I'm not going to go through it as there's a lot written in here. Essentially just their takes on what's going on, but you can grab the link in the description if you are interested. While last bit, found this very interesting video. Thank you, Peter Reynolds, for sharing it. Video, stunning, extraordinary electron microscope images of cannabis trichomes. And so this is a presentation exploring the fascinating development of cannabinoid producing trichomes in cannabis flowers from Professor Zamir K. Punja at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, Canada. And so interestingly enough, if you just look at some of the zoomed up images, it's just so fascinating. And so I don't know about you. I mean, I tried to watch this previously and I got pretty bored halfway through, but I do want to watch the whole thing at some point. But once we zoom in, and it's just fascinating to see what you're looking at when you zoom into the cannabis plant. There's so much we don't know, hence why, I call for descheduling so we can actually research it and figure out what's going on with this plant and how it works, especially with the endocannabinoid system within the human body. But just some fascinating images I wanted to show you. Very cool. We'll put the link in the description. It's about 30 minutes long. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to try and address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I'll catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.